3 hours before I stood in front of 4-star generals to receive the Silver Star, my own father looked me in the eye and told me I was a disgrace to our family. My mother said the same words a moment later, calling me filthy and calling my job dirty. Then they walked out the door to celebrate my sister at the most expensive restaurant in the city, and they left an empty chair reserved for them at the Pentagon. What they did not know was that I had already given that empty chair away, and in exactly 3 minutes on national television, a 4-star general was about to hand a life-changing reward to the person sitting in it. The one person who ever treated me like I actually mattered. My name is Harper Bell, and for 5 years, my only home was a mud-flooded trench in Syria. I slept under a 70-pound plate carrier instead of a blanket. I did not know weekend coffee runs or birthday candles in my 20s, only the sound of gunfire cracking through the dark at 2 in the morning. My pack was always stained brown from combat gauze and tourniquets. I chewed on dry rations while my eyes stayed locked on a thermal scope, because my only job out there was simple and brutal: get bleeding Americans out of the kill zone before they stopped breathing. I came home with a case of PTSD that still wakes me up soaked in sweat some nights, and still makes me scan every rooftop in a grocery store parking lot, but none of that ever seemed to matter to my parents, Gregory and Marlene Bell. Every single phone call I got from home during deployment started and ended with money. Not once did they ask if I still had both arms and both legs. Not once did they ask if I had lost anyone in my unit that week. I remember one call clearly, right after we lost a vehicle to a roadside bomb. My hands were still shaking, still coated in dried blood, when the radio tech handed me the receiver. It was my mother. She did not say hello. She said the bank transfer had not gone through, and that my sister had a brunch the next morning and needed her card fixed immediately. That was the pattern for years. Before I ever left for my first deployment, my parents had already set up my direct deposit to funnel straight into their joint account. Every dollar of hazard pay, every re-enlistment bonus, all of it went to fund my sister Paisley, a 24-year-old content creator who had never smelled gunpowder in her life but would throw a fit if her latte came out wrong. My combat pay covered her downtown apartment lease. My combat pay covered her influencer club memberships. I remember sitting alone in a freezing bunker on Christmas Eve, wiping gun grease off my hands, just so I could approve her rent payment on my phone. In their eyes, I was never a daughter. I was a wallet with a heartbeat, funding a fake lifestyle so my sister could pretend she was self-made while I paid for. Every second of it, the breaking point came on a scorching afternoon when a piece of shrapnel tore straight through my left arm during an ambush outside our base. I sat in the medical tent while a field medic poured alcohol directly into the wound, and the pain burned all the way down to my fingertips. While he packed gauze into my arm, I checked my banking app with my good hand, trying to figure out if I could afford private physical therapy once I got home. My account was sitting near zero. Before I could even process that, the satellite phone rang again. It was my father, demanding $2,000 for my sister to attend a fashion event. I was bleeding through gauze in a war zone, and he wanted cash for a party dress. For the first time in my life, something inside me broke loose. I told him no, and I meant it. My mother grabbed the phone from him and screamed that I was selfish, that my job in the dirt did not matter, that nobody looked at me anyway, so why did I even need money? I hung up on her mid-sentence and walked back to get stitched up in silence. Less than a month later, I found out exactly how far their entitlement went. Sitting on an ammo crate during a night watch, I saw a photo pop up on my sister's page. Her standing in our parents' driveway, holding the keys to a brand new luxury SUV, my mother and father beaming beside her. The caption talked about a family that supports her dreams. I knew they could never afford that car outright, so I pulled the property records myself. They had taken out a second mortgage on the house, betting every penny on the assumption that my military allotments would cover the payments forever. That night, sitting in the cold and the dark, the last piece of loyalty I had for them disappeared completely. I did not cry. I opened my pay portal and cancelled every single allotment tied to their accounts. I opened my personnel file and removed them as my emergency beneficiaries. I locked every dollar I earned into an account only I controlled, and I turned my phone off while it lit up with dozens of furious messages. I did not answer a single one. I strapped my gear back on and went back to work, because 10 minutes later, my unit rolled out on a hostage rescue mission that turned into a brutal ambush. I spent 4 hours crawling through gunfire that day, dragging 12 wounded soldiers out of the kill zone with my own 2 hands. Watching those men breathe on the chopper that night taught me something my parents never could, that the only validation worth having comes from the lives you actually save, not the people who call you dirty. 4 days later, I was ordered back to Washington, and my commander personally submitted my name for the Silver Star. Standing in the Pentagon parking lot, holding a gold-sealed invitation with 2 VIP tickets, I decided to give my parents one final test. I drove to their house, walked inside past the smell of vanilla candles and reality television, and dropped that envelope on their coffee table. My father barely glanced at it before calling the ceremony a waste of his Friday night. My mother said she had already booked a VIP table at the most expensive restaurant in town to celebrate my sister landing her first brand deal, a free handbag. When I asked if they understood what the medal actually meant, my mother looked me up and down in my uniform and delivered the line that ended everything between us, calling me a disgrace covered in gunpowder and filthy sweat who would never stand beside them. I walked out, locked the door behind me, and drove away without looking back. That night I called the one person who had never once asked me for a dime. Her name was Diane Foster, my mother's older sister, a woman who spent 30 years as a trauma nurse at a veterans hospital, while my mother spent her life chasing country club status. Every single month during my deployment, Diane had sent me a care package filled with gauze, wool socks, and shortbread cookies, never once asking for anything in return. When I called and asked her to fly to Washington for the ceremony, she did not hesitate for a second. My old teammate Sierra Cole booked her flight and rushed an evening gown to my apartment within a day. When Diane walked off that plane holding a beat-up old suitcase, it was the most beautiful thing I had seen in years. The night of the ceremony, the Pentagon auditorium was packed with generals, press, and cameras broadcasting live across the country. A 4-star general named Whitfield stood at the podium and read my combat report out loud, describing the ambush, the shrapnel wound, and the 12 soldiers I pulled from the fire. The entire room rose to its feet in applause. When he pinned the Silver Star to my chest, I felt the weight of every single life I had carried out of that kill zone. But the real turning point came seconds later, when General Whitfield announced a brand new national initiative honoring the family members who hold the line at home. He opened a folder and announced the very first recipient of a multi-million-dollar package, and it was not my mother. It was Diane Foster. The cameras spun toward her in the front row as she sat frozen in shock. The general read out the full award live on television. A fully paid lakefront home for life, complete medical coverage for the rest of her days, and an all-expenses-paid trip across Europe, all in recognition of 30 years spent serving veterans without asking for a single thing in return. The room exploded into applause as I walked her up to the stage myself. I knew exactly who was watching that broadcast from a fancy restaurant across town, and I knew exactly what was happening to their faces in that moment. By the time we left the building, my phone had nearly 50 missed calls. My parents and my sister had abandoned their dinner and driven straight to my apartment building, waiting outside my door in their formal clothes, demanding I call the general and change the name on the deed. My father slammed his fist into the wall beside my head when I refused. My mother grabbed my injured arm and sobbed about blood being family. My sister screamed that I had ruined her reputation on national television. I listened to every single one of their demands, then told them plainly that I accepted their sudden apology only for my own peace, that there would never be forgiveness, and that their access to my life was permanently over. I closed the door, locked it twice, and let the silence swallow the hallway. By the time we left the building, my phone had nearly 50 missed calls. My parents and my sister had abandoned their dinner and driven straight to my apartment building, waiting outside my door in their formal clothes, demanding I call the general and change the name on the deed. My father slammed his fist into the wall beside my head when I refused. My mother grabbed my injured arm and sobbed about blood being family. My sister screamed that I had ruined her reputation on national television. I listened to every single one of their demands, then told them plainly that I accepted their sudden apology only for my own peace, that there would never be forgiveness, and that their access to my life was permanently over. I closed the door, locked it twice, and let the silence swallow the hallway. 4 months later, without my paycheck propping up their lifestyle, their entire world collapsed. My sister maxed out every credit card trying to keep her image alive, until the bank repossessed the SUV right on a public sidewalk, while her so-called friends filmed the whole thing instead of helping her. My parents drained their retirement account trying to cover the mortgage, but it was already too late, and the bank foreclosed on the house. They now live in a cramped rental across town, watching from a distance as the daughter they called a disgrace continues to rise. Meanwhile, Diane moved into her lakefront home, sipping tea on her deck every morning with nothing but peace around her. I got promoted to senior instructor at Fort Bragg, training the next generation of combat medics under the Carolina sun. Some weekends I drive out to that lake house, and the smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread meets me at the door, instead of screaming and demands for cash. Looking back now, I understand something simple. Real family is never about shared blood or a last name. Real family is the person who shows up without being asked, who sends comfort instead of debt, and who stands beside you when everything is falling apart. If you have ever been treated like a wallet by the people who are supposed to love you, I hope this story reminded you that walking away is not weakness. It is survival.